Greetings from the Tesseract Order of Magi. This is Shane Nelson, and once again we stand at the precipice, ready to leap headfirst into the light of knowledge and wisdom concerning the Mazzaroth and its astrotheological and philosophical connections. This video will be another shotgun blast of information, so strap in. Let us begin with the 12 apostles of the Messiah. Just as in previous videos, we have shown you how the 12 tribes of Israel are connected to the 12 constellations of the Mazzaroth. We will have a closer look at the 12 apostles and see if there is a connection with them as well. Some of these connections are easy to see, while others you must dig deeper to find their correspondences. Much of this video will seem foolish to the unwise, so in order to fully understand and appreciate the information shown to you in this video, it will be a good idea to watch parts 1 through 4 before continuing, as I will be building even more on some of the concepts presented in those videos. Andrew corresponds to Aries. Aries is the first house of the tropical positioned Zodiac, and ruled by the masculine planet Mars. The name Andrew means masculine or manly. Andrew also was of the first to follow the Messiah. The name Bartholomew means furrow. A furrow is a trench that cattle dig with a plow. This corresponds to Taurus. The name Thomas means twin. Thomas is Gemini. Gemini is depicted as two twins. Another deeper astrological understanding of this house is how it is double-minded and has a marked tendency to change. So think in terms of it having a double mind. In John chapter 20, verse 27, Messiah told Thomas to take his finger and touch his hands. Then he said to take his hands and touch his side. These actions were done so that Thomas would stop doubting, but it's also interesting to note that the house of Gemini rules the hands, fingers, shoulders, and arms. Thaddeus is derived from a word meaning heart, so Thaddeus corresponds to the house of Leo, since Leo is stationed in the heart of the man of the Mazzaroth. Philip corresponds to Sagittarius. The name Philip means friend of horses. In Acts chapter 8, we see Philip riding in a chariot of horses with the Ethiopian eunuch. Sagittarius represents the idea of a type of warring commander. Chariots are used for war, as with Sagittarius the commander with his bow ready to make war. Philip took command of the horses and ordered them to stop. Sagittarius is on the south of the Mazzaroth wheel. Philip was told by the Spirit to go south in Acts chapter 8, verse 26. From there, the Spirit told him to join himself to the chariot in Acts chapter 8, verse 28. The eunuch was a man of great authority, according to verse 27, just as Sagittarius is a commander with great authority. Judas Iscariot corresponds to Scorpio. He gave the kiss of death to the Messiah. The kiss of death refers to the kiss Judas gave to the Messiah, identifying him to his executioners. Scorpio is the only constellation said to have been replaced by another constellation, which is Aquila, as is evident with the Bible's description of a cherub. Judas is the only disciple to be replaced by another disciple, which was Matthias. He betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver. In the tropical position of the Mazzaroth, the winter solstice is 30 days from the end of the zodiac sign of Scorpio and is from November 22nd to December 22nd. Judas was evil and met his destruction by suicide. One of the main traits of this house of Scorpio is the concept of death. Abaddon, also known to the Greeks as Apollyon, is a star in the tail of Scorpio, which means the destroyer. More in-depth information of these connections to Judas and Scorpio can be found in our video titled The Great Mazzaroth Part 2. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? James corresponds to Cancer. James started his pilgrimage by the sea. His death also brings meaning since his body was transported by sea. James worked as a fisherman alongside his brother John before becoming disciples. Cancer is a water sign, which is ruled by the moon, and the moon controls the tides. The moon also drastically affects molting activity in crabs and crayfish. Matthew, the tax collector and scribe, corresponds to Virgo. The name Matthew means gift from God. The same gift can be seen as the virgin birth of the Messiah, since the house of Virgo is represented in the area of the female body in which babies are formed. Virgo traits are that of a statistician. It is a sign which prescribes being meticulous, like a scribe or tax collector. Matthew's gospel records the most information about Messiah's birth, and pretty much the most information in general. He was very thorough. Jacob the Lesser, also known as Jacob, son of Alphaeus, corresponds to Capricorn. The reason for this is because of the name Alphaeus. This name means changing. Jacob was not mentioned once in Scripture without his father's name, Alphaeus, being mentioned too. The idea surrounding Capricorn, the sea goat, is that it is a constellation which is going through a process of change or transformation. John the Beloved was a fisherman with James before they became disciples. John corresponds to Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer who pours the water out to save or resurrect a dead, dying fish at his feet. John is more of an Aquarius type. His gospel is all about pouring water, the Spirit, and giving life, and talks about spiritual relationships a lot. He is one with the air nature and talks about the subtle things in the spirit realm. Saturn rules the house of Aquarius. Saturn is the 7th planet, and it represents fullness or completeness, time, wisdom, and in some cultures, an old man. John was the oldest surviving apostle. He lived a full, complete life and died an old, wise man. Of natural causes, of course. Saturn represents things coming to an end, similar to how the 7th day brings an end to the week, which is Saturday. His death brought an end to the original Apostolic 12. Simon Peter corresponds to Pisces. Pisces is to fish. Peter was a fisherman. Messiah told Peter that he would make him a fisher of men. Many other scriptures show him fishing. Pisces has a strong emotional theme to its house. We notice from scripture that Peter often acted out of emotion rather than logic regularly. Simon the Canaanite corresponds to Libra. Not much is known about Simon the Canaanite, so through the process of elimination, this sign seems to fit him. Libra is the only non-living sign of the zodiac. So Simon the Canaanite was the only apostle without much life or personality in the scriptures. Near the end of my first video of the Great Mazzaroth series, I showed how the Mazzaroth can be divided into sections of space concerning the constellations of what predominantly expresses what God is doing, and the other half of the constellations show the current state of humanity and what humanity was doing. Zodiacal constellations at their core are represented as male and female. Every other constellation represents male, female, and so on. Following this pattern, we recognize that constellations which widely represent God or what he is doing are the male constellations, and we as humans represent the female constellations. It's fitting this way, knowing that we are the bride and he is the groom. To take this a step further, you will notice that the female constellations are represented by an ancient understanding of being water and earth, whereas the male constellations represent air and fire. Humans were formed from the earth, and our bodies are mostly water. God is a spirit, and it is only fitting that the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, which means wind or air. Several other scriptures describe God as being one with fire. This concept of male and female is important for understanding the vast mysteries of heaven, but let's start with the basics of human existence and how it corresponds to the order of planets. But before I do, I must explain the planetary influences according to their basic archetypes. Wait, did I just use the word planetary influence? Yes, I did, as there is a good witness for it in Job chapter 38, verse 31. Can you bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades? And all this time, religion said constellations don't have good or bad influences because, well, that would be astrology. The moon represents change, mobility, female, mother, full or empty, generates a weak, short aspect. It is maternal in nature, mothering, emotions, the mind. Venus represents peace, love, emotion, grace, charm, beauty, blessing, sensuality. Mercury represents activity. It's known as the swift messenger. It is the planet of day-to-day expression, communication, and represents coordination, mentality, and thoughts. A little known fact about Mercury is that it might not have a very strong punch-in-the-face effect like the other planets do, but it is one of the most important and powerful little planets in the sky. Mercury is the principle of planetary influence in and of itself. The mercurial principle is that of multiplorency. It embodies our means of adaptation. It represents the many facets of existence. Mercury is presented as a blank slate, an open-ended modality of being. Mercury is thought to be absorbed into the influences of other major planetary aspects. This is true to an extent since Mercury and the moon are convertible per the harmony of the sign, but I am of the theory that Mercury injects itself into the sign. A magi mystery of the heavens is that Mercury never travels far from the sun, since it's closest to the sun most of the time. The sun represents life and vitality, and we know that wherever there is life, there is communication. Mercury is the planet of communication and thoughts. It rules the talkative Gemini and the teacher Virgo. Wherever you see plants, trees, birds of the sky, fish of the sea, beasts of the field, people, or even bacteria, there is communication, no matter if it's visible, audible, stimuli, chemical, written, or frequency. The understanding of Mercury is that it is never far from life, the sun, and its influence permeates all living things. Mercury's glyph represents mind over spirit over flesh. Unlike the other planets, other than Pluto, Mercury exists in all three forms of human existence simultaneously, whereas the other planets do not. I'll touch on the glyphs a little bit later in this video. The sun represents vitality. It proclaims the solar year at equinox. The sun establishes the month's astro sign. Major prophetic God-moving events happen when the sun moves into another house, beginning a new age at vernal equinox. Mars represents the lesser malefic, action, energy, fire, distress, war, hot, trailblazer, violence, easily agitated, spontaneous, out of control, animal nature, aggression, anger, survival instincts, assertive, directive, forthright, adventurous, impulsive, rash, impatient, and forceful. Jupiter represents expansion, great fortune, Messiah, king, favor, philosophy, intellect, religion, law, and order. It is the opposite of Saturn. Jupiter increases and Saturn decreases. Saturn represents wisdom, time, greater in fortune, documenter, accountability, the destroyer, judgment, the greater malefic, opposite of Jupiter, i.e., contracting influences as Jupiter increases. Saturn is the great ender, meaning he can bring current events to a close. Saturn also represents depravity and seems to diminish whatever it touches. Neptune represents chaos, dreams, spirituality, water, the sea, prophecy, inspiration, premonition, illusion, confusion, religious progression, revolution, schemes, and the hidden hand of change. Uranus represents being electric and crammed with change. Uranus is forward-looking. It balks at tradition. Its focus is originality and individuality, and deals more with the unseen spiritual nature and forces at work behind the scenes. Pluto represents power, domination, subtle force, and brings coercion or cooperation. It deals in extremes, warping and distorting. Pluto is the harbinger of limitations, death, empowerment, resurrection, purging, roadblocks, and greater achievement. These three unseen planets carry a more spiritual, unseen nature to their interpretable qualities, unlike the observable planets, which carry a more physical manifestation, which directly affect the 3D world. The order of observable planets can be synchronized to a person's life, if we go in astrological order. The sun equals life. The moon equals the mind. Mercury equals communication. Venus is love. Earth is self-awareness. Mars is struggle or bad behavior. Jupiter is expanding in fortune or blessing. Saturn is diminishing or ending. So comparing these things to a person's life, we see that children are first given life in the womb at conception. This is the sun. The mind then forms as the child grows. This is the moon. To add to the understanding of the moon, notice how the moon waxes and wanes in a monthly cycle. We also wax in intelligence, and in old age it wanes. Immediately when a baby is born, it has a built-in mechanism of communication which expresses itself in the form of crying. Then comes simple words. This is Mercury. The child then begins to love its parents and show emotional expressions. This is Venus. Eventually, they become self-aware and know that they exist. They begin to also preserve memories. This can be understood as our home planet, Earth. Then, bad behavior and conflict comes. The struggle in adolescence, growth pains, and discipline from our parents is forced on us. This can be understood as Mars. Finally, a person is in their prime, expanding in life, family, and fortune. This is Jupiter. As the person matures into old age, they develop health problems and diminish before expiring. It is at this point in life that a person is most wise. Then finally comes the end of that person's life. These things correspond to Saturn. The additional three unobservable planets which come after these have a meaning as well, but it relates to the existence of mankind after death. The name Uranus literally means heaven in the Greek, and it is the planet of change. No matter if you believe in an afterlife or not, once you are dead, you immediately go through a natural process of change. Neptune is the planet of dreams, spirituality, and illusion. Pluto can either represent resurrection or death. I suppose a person's Pluto would depend greatly on if their names were written in the book of life. So now we know how the planets correspond to a person's entire life in a linear fashion. Now let's see how they work on an average 24-hour day. Please keep in mind that the average day cycle of a human is a rehearsal for a prophetic notion. This embedded notion of our reality is how we practice our death when we go to sleep, and when we awake in the morning, we practice our resurrection. As the sun rises, so we also rise out of our beds, being restored and rested. This is the sun. It takes a few moments for our mind, which is represented as the moon, to adjust to its new reality of consciousness, since just a few moments before we were asleep, obviously. Next comes the communication aspect of Mercury with our loved ones, and our own bodies begin sending messages to our mind concerning what we need to survive, such as food and the expulsion of human waste. We might even discuss our plans for the day and what we should do. All these things correspond to Mercury. Next comes Venus. I can't speak for everyone, but this is normally a good time to pray and thank Yahuwah for the new day. And when family members part ways to begin their work day, expressions of love are often shared for one another, maybe a hug, upon exiting each other's presence. Then comes the everyday struggle of survival and work. This is Mars. This is when we have to get tough and exert force, either physical force or mental force, matters not, since Mars is generally the planet of force. We must push hard to earn an income and do things we would rather not have to do. Once our toil is finished, we have gained an increase of fortune and an expansion for our families and home. This is Jupiter. And what a blessing it is to finally finish a day of work and relax. The end of our day is ascribed to Saturn. We lay in our beds and go to sleep. The day has ended. Our bodies go through an extreme change as we fall asleep, and our metabolisms change. Higher brain functions and chemical reactions either cease or slow down. This is Uranus. Uranus is extreme change. At this point, we inch ever closer to deeper sleep as our bodies go through the phases of shutting down. Once deep sleep is attained, we enter the Neptune phase, the time of dreams and chaos. Once our bodies have generated enough rest, then comes the Pluto stage, and we open our eyes to the resurrection of a new day, and again we rise from our beds like the sun rises on the horizon, and the cycle continues. The astrological symbols called glyphs are broken down into three main categories: full circle, half circle, cross, or arrow-like symbol. The full circle represents the spirit, the half circle represents the mind, the cross arrow symbol represents flesh. Carnality would be a better word than flesh, but we will use flesh for this segment of the teaching. If we look at Saturn's glyph, we gain the understanding of its character being flesh over mind. This is to say, the flesh prioritizes over the mind. If we look at Venus's glyph, it is spirit over flesh. So the spirit takes priority over the flesh. Jupiter's glyph is mind over flesh, and Mars's glyph is flesh over spirit. Pluto's glyph is spirit over mind over flesh, whereas Mercury's glyph, as I said before, is mind over spirit over flesh. According to the historian Josephus, the Jewish temple represented the universal visibility of heaven in War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 5, verse 4. Also, in his book, Antiquities of the Jews, Chapter 6, verse 7, he writes about the candlestick, or better known as the menorah, representing the 7 visible planets. Over against this table near the southern wall was set a candlestick of cast gold, hollow within, being of the weight of about 100 pounds. It was made with its knops and lilies and pomegranates and bowls, which ornaments amounted to 70 in all, by which means the shaft elevated itself on high from a single base, and spread itself into as many branches as there are planets, including the sun among them. It terminated in 7 heads in one row, all standing parallel to one another, and these branches carried 7 lamps, one by one, in imitation of the number of planets. These lamps looked to the east and to the south, the candlestick being situated obliquely. Next, in chapter 7, verse 7, Josephus makes the claim that the table of showbread and its 12 loaves of bread represented the 12 months of the year. There are 3 types of prophets found in Scripture. Seer is H7200, which is Ra'ah. It means the one who sees visions. Prophet is H5030. It is Navi, the one who speaks for Yahuwah, or a bubbling up of the Spirit. Stargazer is H2374. It is the Hebrew word cozy, similar to the Hebrew word kokba, which is star. Think more in lines of prophet / astrological interpreter. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 11, for when David was up in the morning, the word of Yahuwah came unto the prophet Gad, David's stargazer, H2374, saying, etc. But Bai's translators find this rather embarrassing, so they typically change it to seer or prophet in the text, but they leave Isaiah 47, verse 13, untouched when it says stargazer, which is the exact same Hebrew word. Isaiah 47, verse 13 states, all the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, those stargazers, H2374, who make predictions month by month. Let them save you from what is coming upon you. As we covered in video 3, these types of challenges from God are rhetorical. The most basic standards of an astrologer were to recognize good and bad signs which were happening in the heaven and to make preparations for coming personal or national events. These things would also include advising kings, as kings found them to be most valuable members of their courts. People like the Magi were highly respected in ancient times, and for God to boast in saying that he was going to bring calamity and there was not a single thing an astrologer could do about it meant you were in deep, serious trouble. Daniel was made chief of the Magi. In Daniel chapter 1, verse 20, it says, "In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the horoscopists and astrologers in his entire kingdom." When I read this, it makes me think that Daniel and his friends were 10 times better at horoscopy and astrology than anyone else in the kingdom, because it says they were proficient in every matter of wisdom. Since horoscopy and astrology were one of the main doctrines of wisdom back in those days, it's only sensible to believe, according to this verse, that they understood it. Why are the elements assigned to the Mazzaroth? Well, that's a simple answer. It makes it easier to judge the heavens. Not only do the signs embody the natures of their element, but the elements help you to understand harmony and disharmony. The lines in this image show what complete harmony looks like. The lines here are 120-degree angles, or trine aspects. So basically, when 2 or 3 planets are in the same elemental house, it means agreement or an alliance. But even the 60-degree sextile aspect still shows harmony, but not as much as the 120-degree aspect. When it comes to sextiles, it means there are 2 elements which are different, yet still agree with one another, though it's not as strong as the same element. Like earth and water mix well together. And, you can't have fire without air. Water does not mix with fire. Fire does not mix with earth. Earth does not mix with air. And air does not mix with water. This disharmony is represented in the hard, square aspects, such as the 45-degree, the 90-degree angles. Although the opposition aspect of 180 degrees is generally regarded as disharmonious or dynamic, it often has quite a motivating effect. Here, the quality of the aspect depends on the planets involved and on what one makes of it. An opposition between 2 planets creates tension between them, often with positive results in the end. Planets in the 180-degree aspect are like planets that do not get along or are considered at war with each other, temporarily, anyways. There are also the antipathies and sympathies of the planets, which also play a role in these things. And here's another tip. A major grand trine sextile aspect will only ever be water and earth or fire and air. 2 Chronicles chapter 17 states, "Behold, and he raised up the pillars before the temple, one on the right hand and the other on the left, and called the name of that on the right Jachin, and that upon the left Boaz." Boaz in Hebrew means in him, or it is strength. Jachin in Hebrew means he will establish, or it will establish. So you could see Jachin as base and Boaz as force. There are so many hidden mysteries for wise men and wise women to seek out within these 2 structures. In Jewish mysticism, these 2 pillars are referred to as strength and wisdom, and are positioned on the right and left of the theoretical 3rd temple called harmony. One must pass through these 2 pillars in order to enter into the temple. Aside from the most obvious of biblical-related themes, let's have a look at the hidden side of divine nature. In just about every mystery school, these structures hold the same universal doctrine of being open-ended modalities of opposing forces. Even though they are opposites, they bring balance. I don't think I can do justice to the numerous synchronicities to this doctrine in words, but I'll try. Since the dawn of civilization, 2 pillars have guarded the entrance of sacred and mysterious places, whether in art or architecture, Twin pillars are archetypal symbols representing an important gateway or passage toward the better unknown. The fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of wisdom. And so now it's time to get some wisdom. Astrologically, Boaz is the moon. The moon represents wisdom. It also strongly represents femininity, or females. Even the scriptures refer to wisdom as a female. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 20 says, "Wisdom cries out. She uttered her voice in the streets." Proverbs 9 verse 1 says, "Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars." Astrologically, Jachin represents the sun. The sun represents knowledge. It also represents masculinity and males. Scripture also refers to the sun and moon being likened unto a mother and father, such as in Joseph's dream before he was sold into Egyptian servitude by his brothers. When the two names, Boaz and Jachin, are joined together, it means, "In strength shall my house be established." In order for a house to be established, there must be male and female, husband and wife, mother and father. Without these two things, you just have a building that you stay in from time to time, and it's not a home. Likewise, if you remove the moon from the Earth's rotation, the world would wobble out of control with severe weather changes that would destroy all life. If you remove the sun, the Earth would freeze and all life would likewise perish. Each one of us has or has had at one point in our lives these two pillars. The Earth is kept in harmony by these two astronomical bodies, and Earth, as you all know, is our home. Have you noticed the disharmony that follows a person who did not have both parents in their life growing up? What I mean to say is you are that third pillar. You are the result of that harmony which took place between your mother and your father. In the book of Ruth, we see that Boaz is a kinsman redeemer of his dead brother's wife who died childless. It was his duty to bring harmony back into the house by marrying his dead brother's widow. And so the maintenance of the family and the estate predominantly falls onto the pillar Boaz, the moon, the mother. It is no secret that a mother provides the most maintenance for the family unit. The moon is also connected to a woman's menstrual cycle. The synodic cycle of the moon is a constant 29.5 days, and it does not change from that. The sidereal cycle of the moon is a constant 27.3 days, and it will never change from that. This puts a woman's menstrual cycle in the middle of these two cycles. A woman's menstrual cycle is on average 28 days. For those who don't know what these cycles of the moon are, I will explain it. The sidereal cycle is how long it takes for the moon to make a 360-degree circle around the Earth. The synodic cycle is how long it takes the moon to realign with the sun. This is due to the fact that since the Earth is also moving around the sun, the moon must travel farther than 360 degrees to realign with the sun. Another interesting side note is that 14 days after a woman's menstrual cycle, she starts to ovulate. The time of ovulation, as I'm sure you know, is the time that a woman can become pregnant. Science has shown that the moment of conception, there is a flash of light in the egg. If we were to synchronize this 14th of the menstrual cycle to the 14th day of the lunar cycle, the moon would be full of light. So, in a nutshell, we are beings of light. Also, you can compare the festival of Passover. This is when Yeshua died on the cross for our sins, and in doing so, he gave us life again. The heavens are proclaiming the esteem of El, and the expanse is declaring the work of his hand. Day unto day pour forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, and there are no words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he set up a tent for the sun, and it is like a bridegroom coming out of his room. It rejoices like a strong man to run the path. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, and nothing is hidden from its heat. The Torah of Yahuwah is perfect, bringing back the being. The witness of Yahuwah is trustworthy, making wise the simple. The sun and moon are involved in a type of romantic relationship. But just like all romantic relationships, there are ups and downs. During an astronomical new moon, there is harmony. During a full moon opposition, there is disharmony. This works the same in all three branches of hidden sciences. Respectively, most people without a spouse also hold the disharmony of loneliness. The act of passing through these two pillars symbolically represents a transformation or an initiation, even a birth or rebirth, if you will. In order to enter the temple, you must pass through these two pillars. In the oral tradition of hidden sciences, these two pillars represent the alchemy components of gold and silver, sun and moon. These metals are applied the same astrologically. There was a golden and silver key associated with them, which opened the left and right outer swinging doors of the temple. Both keys were inserted at the same time, first to the right towards Jachin, then turned left towards Boaz. The doors which lead to the most holy place are unlocked left first, then right in opposite fashion. There is a lot of esoteric meaning behind this if you dig a little deeper. But to the Magi, the golden key is the key of knowledge, which unlocks the measurement of the heaven, also known as astronomy. Astro means star, and nami means measurement. It's interesting that nearly all celestial mechanics are built upon the motion of the sun according to right ascension declination. The silver key is the key of wisdom, which unlocks the interpretation of heaven by astrology. Astro means star, and logi means branch of study, which comes from the word logos, which means word. In short, it is the study of star words, which is to say, what is the mood of the heaven, or what is the heaven saying at any given time. To be a magi, one must be proficient in both astronomy and astrology. A person can have knowledge, but it is useless without the wisdom to use it. Without the opposite archetypes of these open-ended modalities of the pillars, Boaz relates to left, evil, moon, astrologically, earth and water, female, receptive, terrestrial, planet Earth, the womb, restriction, emotion, justice, and Jachin relates to right, good, sun, astrologically fire and air, male, active, celestial, as in the heaven, not the earth, phallus, flow, logic, and mercy. The spiraling serpent of wisdom, which trails along the two pillars of the tree of life, mark the paths of wisdom which the neophyte follows. Serpents have gotten a bad reputation since religion has taken control of the minds of the masses, but serpents have a highly divine nature about them. The fact that Moses' staff turned into a serpent was a divine sign that Moses was touched by God. Seraphim, angels, are winged serpents, which are aflame. The bronze serpent staff that was held by Moses was an object of healing to those Israelites who were bitten by poisonous serpents in the wilderness. Yeshua, likewise, was lifted up as the healing serpent when he died on the cross, so that when men look on him, they are healed, just like the Israelites looked at the bronze serpent. Even now, within our medical treatment centers, the staff and serpent are symbols of healing. Of course, this comes mainly from the Greeks, but somehow or another, back in ancient times, this was just a universal knowledge. And to top it all off, venom from snakes are used these days to create rare medicines. Of the cherubim, seraphim, and Ophanim, the seraphim are the wisest of all spiritual beings. Remember when Yeshua said, "Be wise as a serpent, humble as a dove"? Well, there's truth in this. The temple is a representation of the human body as well. We have two pillars, and the third pillar, which is in the center, that third pillar in the Kabbalah is the kingdom, foundation, beauty, and crown. The Ark of the Covenant would have rested within this line of the middle pillar. When the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, the Ark of the Covenant disappeared from public awareness. When the second temple was constructed, the two pillars were not rebuilt along with it. I think it's only fitting that they were not rebuilt, since the pinnacle of what that third pillar represents is missing, and thus the entire understanding is missing. Let's have a look at Saturn, which is Binah on the Kabbalistic tree of life. First, let's communicate the astrological archetypes again of Saturn. Saturn represents greater wisdom, the timekeeper, greater fortune, the documenter, accountability, the destroyer, judgment, greater malefic. Any progressed aspect of Saturn brings work, responsibility, and loss. Now in Kabbalah, there is a slight femininity to the notion of wisdom, just like in the scriptures, but women are endowed with a greater degree of Binah, which is intuition, understanding, and wisdom, than men. This is from the idea that the woman Eve was built, according to Genesis chapter 2, verse 22, rather than formed like Adam was in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. And the Hebrew root of built has the same consonants as the word Binah. Genesis chapter 2:18, God makes Eve for the purpose of neged, to go before Adam. This interpretation is dependent on how one chooses to understand before, either as helper who goes before as a champion advocate, or helper who submits before. Because of the context and the way neged is used in Hebrew, I think champion is merited, either to hold Adam accountable or to champion for him, but it's probably both. It seems to hold the idea of the Sephiroth tree's understanding of Saturn nicely. Binah is ascribed to Saturn on the Sephiroth tree. Joshua chapter 5 verse 13. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho that a man was standing before him, neged, with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" The same is found in 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 23. It says, "For all his judgments were before neged me, and as for his statutes, I did not depart from them." Eve previously challenged the reasoning of the serpent on Adam's behalf, and she provided Adam a valid defense by pointing to their own vulnerability. Based on this, I believe women are built for the purpose of advocating on man's behalf and going before men as protecting champions, but not in a physical sense. In a way, women are built with a natural wisdom that men often have to learn over time through hardships. People believe Satan tried to deceive Eve because she was weaker and could easily be goaded into sinning, but I think it was because Satan knew that if he could not get through the champion protector Eve, he had no chance of getting to Adam. If Satan had gone to Adam first, then Eve might have suspected a nefarious act was taking place and shut him down. I find it interesting that the punishment that God placed on Eve after they fell was that of increasing pains of childbirth, and that her desire would be for her husband, but he would rule over her. Is this to say that Eve originally ruled in some effect over Adam, similar to how the moon rules the night and the sun rules the day? Personally, I believe that it does. Perhaps this rulership is to protect Adam's blind spot. And what husband out there wouldn't want a wife that protects his blind spot? The punishment after this sin seemed to be reminiscent with the effect of Saturn: work, responsibility, and loss. But it was a punishment to their benefit, since God said before issuing the judgment on them that he was doing it for their sakes. In the same manner does Saturn's effect have a meaningful impact on our lives, in that without work, responsibility, and loss, we would never mature or become wise. And through our wisdom, preserved through hardships, the world becomes a better place. Some examples of a woman's inert wisdom is, to this day, I've never seen a woman light her pants on fire with gasoline, then try to skateboard off of a roof into a pool of water. Notice the way men treat women in relationships. Men work all day to make money, and what do we do with that money when we get it? We give it to our wives, of course. They are the wise gatekeepers of the home and handle the finances most of the time. Or what about men being hunters? Men can hunt all day with masculine instincts and knowledge of weapons and tracking. But what do we do with the dead animal once it's been speared? We give it to our wives, of course, as a spoil, because we know that in their wisdom they will cut it into fine pieces and prepare a good meal. To this day, I've never seen a man with 50 coupons at the grocery store. I only see women doing this. No, I'm sure there's some guy out there that does it, but I've never seen it personally. Why? Most of the time, women are gatekeepers. They have the blind spot of their home and their husbands. And in wisdom, they try to protect the finances. How many of you men have ever had an idea that you thought was great and set out to do it against the advice of your wives and paid the price when your idea failed miserably? I'm not saying that women don't have knowledge and men don't have wisdom. What I'm saying is that each one is geared more towards only one, such as a key into a lock. Knowledge is worthless without the wisdom to use it. Likewise, a man's existence might feel useless without a woman, and God knew it. That's why he created Eve. The Ephod, Urim, and Thummim. The secret of the Ephod is extremely precious. 6 names were inscribed on each one of the 2 onyx stones that were on the Ephod. 1 stone was on its right, and 1 was on its left. There was no image on the stones of the Ephod, but they were made by an engraver. Engraving is the process of cutting or carving a design on a hard surface. 6 names were inscribed on each of them. To me, this brings up the idea of dice. This also alludes to the 12 sections of the sky. They correspond to the number of the tribes of Israel and 12 constellations. The breastplate was like the work of the ephod according to Exodus chapter 28, verse 15. It was square, corresponding to the 4 compass points, each having its own fitted slot and a precious stone corresponding to a tribe of Israel. The boxes and the rings that were permanently set in the breastplate allude to the celestial equator. Moses first placed them on the breastplate in accordance with the position of the heavenly bodies on the day he erected the tabernacle. Although there is some level of uncertainty with what the names of the stones mean, the most popular opinion is the Hebrew word Urim means lights or fire, and Thummim means perfection. Looking at this from an astrotheological perspective, the breastplate represents the 12 constellations, and the Urim and Thummim, when placed on the breastplate, represent the sun and moon. The Urim and Thummim were tools of a particular type of divination called cleromancy. Cleromancy's definition is a form of sortition or casting of lots in which an outcome is determined by means that normally would be considered random, such as the rolling of dice, but are believed to reveal the will of God or other universal forces and entities. You will notice many squares, such as the breastplate, in Scripture. Squares are thought to be the language of angels, but that's another topic for another day. Let us bring wisdom regarding cubes and squares. The cube is the only shape which represents all the Hebrew letters equaling 22. It is the shape of the New Jerusalem and the most holy place. The cube represents all of creation, north, south, east, west, up, and down. It also represents the power of creation itself, since Yahuwah spoke everything into existence. God places himself in the middle of existence and in the middle of the Mazzaroth wheel. See Ezekiel chapter 2. And the Great Mazzaroth part 4 goes into details about this also. Notice the Creator's use of squares when giving instructions to build things, such as altars, the layout of the camp of Israel, the breastplate, the rooms of the temple. The cube represents an astrological synchronism to creation and existence itself. The cube holds the most divine mysteries of all and touches the essence of eternity. As I spoke about the importance of the number 72 in my last video, let me go deeper into the science of numerology concerning the most ancient esoteric astrological principles of 72. There are 12 houses, 36 deacons, 10 planets, 10 sephirot, and 4 seasons. This equals 72. This is the complete number of the celestial manufactorum, and it's directly related to the 72 names of God. Before I show a great mystery, I must show you a secret of geometry. When the cube is unfolded into a 2-dimensional form, it gives hint to the gospel message of Yeshua HaMashiach. Ancient Jewish sages thought this to be either the Hebrew letter tau or a tree. This is to say, the tree of life. It's interesting to know that Yeshua represents both of these things when, one, he was hung on a tree, and two, he is the Aleph and the Tau. Yeshua said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink." Messiah is the tree of life. So when we eat him, we live forever. Yeshua is speaking in an esoteric spiritual understanding of who he is, or what he is. If Yeshua is represented as the cube, and the cube represents everything in existence, then this means that Yeshua is literally everywhere and is interwoven throughout all aspects of existence and creation. He is the sustenance of life, since all things were created through him. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 6. Yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we exist. And there is but one Master, Yeshua, Messiah, through whom all things came and through whom we exist. If we were to tilt the cube and look at it from a corner, this is what you would see. It represents a well-known mark of the heaven known as a grand trine sextile. It's the rarest of all astronomical configurations and the rarest of all astrological aspects. If we were to add another theoretical grand trine sextile on top of this one to activate all 12 constellations of the Mazzaroth, it would be kind of like this image. When planets are added to the image shown in red dots with the understanding of synchronism to the human body, you will notice a familiar image of ancient Jewish mysticism, with the understanding that the tree of life's function is to serve the human with life. Throughout time, questionable doctrine has arisen concerning these things by unstable people. Just like with all things, knowledge, which is meant to be neutral, can become stumbling blocks for those prone to irrationality and obsession. To the uneducated, these things will be smoke in their eyes. People will always fear and ridicule what they don't understand. We all die, gnosis or no gnosis. Now we peer the veil of one of the greatest of all biblical astrological mysteries, the New Jerusalem. The cubed city, 12,000 stadia in length, breadth, and height. Notice how a cube has 12 edges. Automatically we can see this has astrological correspondences. Within this city is the temple, which is God the Father and the Lamb. They are Ephod in this sense. In this city is the tree of life, which bears 12 different fruits, one for each of the 12 solar months. There is no need for the sun or moon in this city, since Yahuwah himself is the light. There are 12 gates of entry into the city. There are 12 foundations made of 12 precious stones. There are 12 angels guarding the gates. And the foundation of the city is named after the 12 apostles. With dealing in physical terms, excluding time itself, living beings such as the angels and the fruit growing on the tree, we will notice a pattern that relates to the physical structure itself. Length, breadth, and height of the city is 12,000 stadia. Let's call these three measurements 12 by 12 by 12. Then 12 gates of the city. There are 12 foundations of the city, and there are 12 different precious stones. If we're just looking at the physical structure itself, and we take these 12s into account, it is 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12. This equals 72, the complete number of the heaven. The New Jerusalem represents all of heaven. Every planet, every house, every deacon, every path of wisdom, every star, all its archetypes, every emotion it carries, every open-ended modality it brings. It is all of Yahuwah in all of his glory and all of his secrets combined. It is the epiphany of all indescribable mysteries and wonder. Let's talk about how we can determine when the age of Aquarius starts. The most simple way of determining the ages is by using the chief star Regulus in Leo, since it is a star which marks the border between Cancer and Leo. Even going back to ancient Egyptian antiquity, that star was used as a border of house separation. A house is a 30-degree section of space which represents one of the 12 constellations. Sometimes numbered houses are also just called houses for convenience sake, so it can be confusing, but the houses that I'm referring to differ compared to the normal sizes of constellations, which some might call signs. If you are familiar with astronomy, you will notice that some constellations on the ecliptic are less than 30 degrees, while others are much larger and expand beyond 30 degrees. Depending on who you ask or how you define what an age is, you might get different opinions. Today I'd like to put to rest all of the invented assumptions on when the age of Aquarius begins using mathematics. If you forgot what an astrological age is, it is the observance of the sun moving backwards 1 degree along the ecliptic every 72 years until finally the vernal equinox happens in a new house ruled by a different constellation. As time goes on, the vernal equinox happens in a different house about every 2,160 years. For this presentation, we will use right ascension. Right ascension is the angular distance of a particular point measured eastward along the celestial equator from the sun at the vernal equinox to the point in question above the earth. If you are using stellarium, it would be in the top left corner as RA/DEC on date. The numbers to the right are arc hours, arc minutes, and arc seconds. The vernal equinox of the sun is measured at 0 arc hours, 0 arc minutes, and 0 arc seconds. The summer solstice is measured at 6 arc hours, 0 arc minutes, 0 arc seconds. The autumn equinox is measured at 12 arc hours, 0 arc minutes, 0 arc seconds, and the winter solstice is measured at 18 arc hours, 0 arc minutes, 0 arc seconds. There are only 24 arc hours in right ascension. Each house of the zodiac represents 2 arc hours. So the key to finding the border of Pisces and Aquarius can be found by using right ascension to a convenient even number by counting forward as the sun moves 2 arc hours per house until it reaches Pisces. By setting the date to zero out right ascension of Regulus, we go to the date of 16,830, December 11th. Since the star Regulus is showing 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds, this is the location of space that the vernal equinox will be produced in. And the sun will share the same arc hours, arc minutes, and arc seconds, which are 0, on the year 16,832, March 6th, 10 hours, 3 minutes, and 41 seconds in the morning. We will then need to progress the sun forward in time. It needs to move through 7 constellations, or houses, before it reaches Pisces. So 7 constellations equals 14 arc hours in right ascension. The sun reaches 14 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds on the year 16,832, October 4th, at 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 7 seconds in the morning. The closest star matching the declination and right ascension of the sun in this location of space is designated as HIP 417. Basically right below the sun on this date. So using this star as a reference point, let's see where the vernal equinox happens in the year 2022. It happens to the right of this star, closer to Aquarius, meaning we have already been in the age of Aquarius for some time now. Amateur astronomer Michael Hutchinson was able to crunch the numbers even further than stellarium can and stated that the first time the middle line of the sun crossed the border of Pisces and Aquarius was in the year 1843 during the vernal equinox. So now we have a better understanding of when the age of Aquarius began. Technically, we're getting even closer to that big moment in prophetic time when the real water bearer shows back up on Earth and resurrects all of us dead fish. And now, brothers and sisters, we have come to the purpose of this great understanding. We stand at the beginning of a realm of untapped mastery over ourselves, to accomplish the Creator's intention, to know what is good in the world and seek it out, to possess the will to push forward and dare to have the courage to stand up for our beliefs and principles, to train our tongues in silence, to promote the right thoughts of pure intentions, to express appropriate emotional states and reactions, to speak the right words in due time, to conduct honorable actions worthy of praise, to live righteously according to his good instruction, love, mercy, and purpose.
Know, will,
dare, keep silent,
and to the rules of life we enjoin.
Right thought, right feeling, right speech,
right action, right living.